All right, so today we're going back in time, way back
The 17th century.
to 17th century.
Oh,
And
we're diving into a play.
we're diving into a play this time.
Not a history book.
Not a history book this time, which I think makes it even more interesting.
Yeah.
It's called Herod the Great by the Earl of Orrery from 1694.
Oh, wow.
So you got to wonder what
Yeah.
they thought of history back then, how they saw these big figures.
It really is a fascinating lens to look through,
Yeah.
Instead of just like a dry recounting of facts,
Right.
we're seeing how history was perceived and reshaped through the eyes of a playwright.
Yeah,
It's like getting a glimpse into the cultural imagination of that era.
exactly. So let's get into it.
Okay.
What struck me right away was how Orrery portrays Herod.
Yeah.
He's not just some evil king twirling his mustache.
Right.
He's complex,
Uh-huh.
like a Shakespearean character with all
Right.
these conflicting emotions swirling around inside him.
He really is. You see this incredible inner turmoil in Act 3, where Herod delivers this powerful soliloquy.
Correct.
He's wrestling with the guilt of his actions, all the people he's had killed to secure his power.
Right.
But at the same time, he's desperately trying to justify it all.
Yeah, could you give me an example of that? What kind of language does he use?
Well, there's this one line where he says, "My crimes are great, I must confess, but greater were the fears that urged them."
Okay.
So he's acknowledging the darkness within him, but trying to shift the blame,
Right.
claiming that his actions were driven by necessity,
Yeah.
by fear.
Uh-huh.
It's a classic case of a character trying to convince himself that the ends justify the means.
Wow. So even back then, playwrights were exploring these morally ambiguous characters,
Yes.
forcing the audience to confront these difficult questions about power and its corrupting influence.
Absolutely, and it's not just through his words that we see Herod's torment.
Right.
Orrery also uses vivid imagery to convey his inner state, like the scene where Herod wakes up from a nightmare haunted by the ghosts of those he's murdered.
Oh, wow.
It's such a powerful visual representation of his guilt and the psychological toll his actions have taken.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
So we're not just talking about historical figures here, we're talking about the human condition.
Right.
These universal themes of ambition, guilt, and the struggle for power.
Yeah.
Things haven't changed that much, have they?
Not really. And speaking of intense emotions, this entire play is fueled by them,
Yeah.
particularly when it comes to the relationships between Herod Antipater and Salome.
Yes, there's so much tension between them.
Right.
And you get the sense that it could just erupt at any moment.
Oh, yeah.
How does Ori create that feeling in the dialogue?
He does it brilliantly through a combination of sharp-pointed exchanges
Okay.
and these loaded silences that hang heavy between the characters.
Yeah.
For example, when Salome is plotting to get rid of her rivals Miriam's Sohemus, you can practically feel the venom dripping from her words as she whispers her scheme to Herod.
It's like a viper waiting to strike.
Totally.
And then there's Antipater, who is deeply in love with Mariamne.
Yes.
He's willing to risk everything,
Uh-huh.
even defying his own father for her.
Yeah.
That's got to be a tough situation.
It is, and it creates this incredible moral dilemma for him.
Yeah.
He's torn between his love for Mariam and his loyalty to his father,
Right.
and ultimately his choices have tragic consequences.
Of course.
But what's fascinating is how Orrery uses these personal relationships
Okay.
to explore the broader political landscape.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, this play was written in 17th century England,
Yeah.
a time of great political upheaval.
So are you saying that there might be a connection between the play and what was happening in England at the time?
It's hard to ignore the possibility. I mean,
Yeah.
consider the parallels between Herod, a king desperately clinging to power,
Right.
and the English monarchs of that era who were facing their own challenges to their authority.
Hmm.
It's not a stretch to think that Orrery might be using Herod's story as a cautionary tale,
Okay.
a way to explore the dangers of unchecked ambition and the fragility of power.
That's really thought-provoking.
Yeah.
It's like he's holding up a mirror to his own society, using the guise of a historical drama to comment on contemporary issues.
Exactly.
One thing I've been wondering about is the portrayal of women in this play.
Okay.
It's clearly set in a patriarchal society,
Right.
but the women, especially Mariamne and Salome,
Yes.
seem to wield a surprising amount of influence.
They absolutely do. They're not just passive bystanders, they're active agents in their own destinies.
Yeah.
Mariamne, for instance, is portrayed as this virtuous figure who stands up to Herod,
Right.
challenging his authority and forcing him to question his own actions.
And she does it with such dignity and conviction.
Yes,
She's definitely not afraid to speak her mind.
she's not.
What about Salome?
Oh, solid.
She's obviously driven by jealousy and ambition,
Yeah.
but you can't deny that she's a master manipulator.
Yeah. She certainly is. She uses her cunning and her influence over Herod to orchestrate events, even if it means resorting to deception and treachery.
Right.
It's a reminder that power can take many forms,
Yeah.
and it's not always wielded by those in positions of formal authority.
Okay, let's take a quick step back here and talk about the historical accuracy of the play.
Okay.
I mean, it's based on real figures and events,
All right.
but I imagine there's some dramatic license being taken, right?
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
But that was pretty standard practice for historical dramas of that era.
Okay.
The goal wasn't necessarily to be completely factual.
Right.
It was to use history as a springboard for exploring broader themes and creating a compelling narrative.
Right.
And that's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
Because the way Orrery chooses to deviate from the historical record
Yeah.
can tell us a lot about his own perspective and the cultural context of the play.
So it's not just about what he includes, but also about what he chooses to emphasize or downplay.
Yeah.
It's like a puzzle where we have to look for the hidden meanings and messages
Exactly.
embedded within the story.
And one of the things that jumps out at me is how Orrery portrays the Jewish characters.
Okay.
Now, it's important to remember that this was a time of significant anti-Semitism in England,
Right.
and those prejudices undoubtedly influenced how Jewish characters were depicted on stage.
So while the play is a fascinating window into the past, we also have to acknowledge
Yeah.
that it reflects some of the biases and prejudices of its time.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that even works of art can be products of their time,
Right.
and it's crucial to approach them with a critical eye,
Yeah.
recognizing both their strengths and their limitations.
Well said.
But let's not get too bogged down in the heavy stuff.
Okay.
This is a play, after all.
Yeah.
And it's meant to be entertaining.
Oh, definitely. And Orrery doesn't disappoint on that front.
No, he doesn't.
He really knows how to craft a gripping story with all the twists and turns, betrayals, and over-the-top passions that make for great drama.
He's like the 17th century version of a soap opera writer.
Totally.
With all the intrigue and scandal you could ask for.
And he uses symbolism and spectacle masterfully
Yes.
to enhance the emotional impact.
He does.
Like that recurring setting of the obscure grotto.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just a random cave, is it?
Not at all. It's symbol of all the hidden machinations and conspiracies that are driving the plot forward.
Right.
It's like a visual representation of the underbelly of power,
Yeah.
where secrets are traded and plots are hatched.
And what about those ghosts that appear to Herod?
Oh, yes.
It's such a chilling image.
Yeah.
What do you make of their significance?
They're not just there for spooky effect.
Right.
They represent Herod's guilt and foreshadow his eventual downfall.
Okay.
It's a classic dramatic device to create suspense
Yeah.
and remind the audience that actions have consequences.
It's like the past is literally coming back to haunt him.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We've
talked about Herod's complex character,
Yeah.
the intense relationships between the characters,
Uh-huh.
and how the play reflects the political and social context of 17th century England.
Right.
What stands out to you as the most compelling aspect of the play so far?
I think it's the way Orrery manages to weave together these different strands.
Okay.
The personal, the political, the historical,
Uh,
to create this rich tapestry of human drama.
Yeah.
And he does it in a way that's both entertaining and thought-provoking,
Right.
prompting the audience to consider the timeless questions about power, ambition, and the choices we make.
I completely agree, and that's what makes this deep dive so exciting.
Yeah.
We're not just learning about a play, we're exploring the intersection of history, culture, and human nature.
Right.
But we're just getting started. There's so much more to uncover.
So much more. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, isn't it? We've got this historical drama on the surface, but underneath there are all these subtle hints and allusions to the political and social anxieties of Orrery's own time.
It makes you wonder if audiences back then picked up on those nuances.
Right.
Are they sitting there thinking,
Yeah.
Herod's kind of like King so-and-so?
Right.
Or was it more about the spectacle and the drama?
That's a great question. It's hard to know for sure,
Yeah.
but I'd imagine it was a bit of both.
Okay.
On the one hand, you have this gripping story of love, betrayal, and revenge playing out on stage,
Right.
which would have been highly entertaining in its own right.
Of course.
But on the other hand, you can't discount the power of subtle suggestion.
Right.
Those parallels between Herod and contemporary English monarchs might not have been explicit,
Yeah.
but they would have been lurking beneath the surface. perhaps sparking conversations and debates among audience members after the curtain fell.
So it's like Orrery is planting these seeds of thought,
Exactly.
inviting the audience to make their own connections and draw their own conclusions.
Yeah, it's a much more sophisticated form of social commentary than just hitting people over the head with a message.
Right.
Precisely. And it's a testament to Orrery's skill as a playwright that he can do so while still delivering a thoroughly entertaining and engaging piece of theater.
Okay.
But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the women in this play.
Okay.
We've already touched on Mariam, Solem, and Solemn,
Right.
but I think it's worth digging a little deeper into their roles and what they represent.
I'm all for that. In a lot of historical dramas, the women are just there to be love interests or damsels in distress.
Right.
But in Herod the Great,
Yeah.
they seem to have much more agency and depth.
Absolutely. They're not just reacting to the actions of the men.
Right.
They're driving the plot forward in many ways.
Yeah.
Take Mariam, for example.
Okay.
She's portrayed as this incredibly strong and virtuous woman, and she's not afraid to stand up to Herod, even though it puts her in danger.
Yeah.
Her unwavering moral compass is a constant challenge to his authority, forcing him to confront his own flaws and the consequences of his actions.
She's like the voice of conscience.
Yes.
The one character who refuses to compromise her principles, even in the face of immense pressure.
Exactly.
And then you have Salome,
Oh, Salah.
who's almost the opposite in some ways.
Right.
She's ambitious, ruthless, and willing to do whatever it takes to get what she wants.
She's a fascinating character, isn't she?
Yeah.
On the one hand, you can see her as this villainous figure driven by jealousy and a lust for power.
Right.
But on the other hand, you can also see her as a product of her environment.
Okay.
In a society where women are often marginalized and denied agency,
Yeah.
she's found a way to assert herself, even if it means using manipulation and deceit.
Right.
She's playing the game by the rules that have been set for her, even if those rules are unfair.
It's like she's saying, if you're going to treat me like a pawn, I'm going to become the most powerful pawn on the board. It makes you wonder if Orrery was trying to make a statement about the limited options available to women in his own time.
It's certainly possible, and it adds another layer of complexity to the play's exploration of power dynamics and the different ways in which individuals navigate those dynamics.
Now, we can't talk about a play without talking about the ending.
Right.
And let me tell you, the final act of Herod the Great is a wild ride.
Oh, it is.
It's full of twists and turns, shocking revelations,
Yeah.
and of course a healthy dose of tragedy.
It's almost operatic in its intensity, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
The emotions are heightened, the stakes are incredibly high,
Right.
and the consequences are devastating.
Without giving too much away for our listeners who haven't read the play yet,
Okay.
can you tell us a little bit about how the story unfolds in that final act?
Sure.
What are some of the key events that lead up to the climax?
Well, let's just say that all the simmering tensions and conflicts we've been discussing come to a head in a spectacular fashion.
Okay.
Secrets are revealed, alliances are broken, and the characters are forced to make impossible choices that ultimately lead to their downfall.
Right.
It's a masterclass in dramatic pacing, with each scene building upon the previous one until we reach this explosive climax that leaves the audience reeling.
And Orrery doesn't shy away from the bloodshed, does he?
Oh, absolutely.
There are some pretty intense scenes of violence that I imagine would have been quite shocking for audiences back then.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just the physical violence that's impactful.
Right.
It's the emotional violence as well.
Yeah.
The betrayals, the heartbreak, the loss of innocence. It all takes a toll on the characters and leaves a lasting impression on the audience. It's a reminder that power can be a destructive force.
Right.
And those who seek it often pay a heavy price.
So it's not a happy ending, to say the least.
No, it's not.
But is there a sense of catharsis?
Mm.
Do the characters achieve some kind of resolution, even in their downfall?
That's an interesting question. I think there's a sense of inevitability to the ending, a feeling that these characters were always destined for tragedy.
Yeah.
But within that tragedy, there are moments of grace and redemption.
Okay.
Some characters find forgiveness, others make peace with their past, and still others come to terms with the consequences of their choices. It's not a tidy resolution, but it's a fitting end to a story that's been grappling with complex themes of morality, ambition, and the human condition.
You know, one of the things that struck me about the play is how Orrery uses symbolism to foreshadow the tragic events.
Oh, yeah.
For example, those recurring nightmares that Herod has.
Right.
or the way he keeps referring to himself as the shadow of death,
Ah,
is he's constantly reminded of his own mortality and the darkness that surrounds him.
it's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
Those symbolic elements add a layer of depth and richness to the storytelling,
Right.
allowing Orrery to convey meaning and emotion without being overly explicit.
Yeah.
It's like he's inviting the audience to participate in the creative process, to decode those symbols and draw their own conclusions about their significance.
And it keeps us on the edge of our seats, wondering what's going to happen next.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the ending,
Yeah.
but we haven't really discussed Herod's final moments.
Right.
What happens to him?
Mm.
How does it all end for this complex, tragic figure? Well, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read the play.
Right.
But let's just say that Herod's end is fittingly dramatic.
Yeah.
He's consumed by paranoia,
Uh-huh.
guilt, and the weight of his own ambition.
Right.
In his final moments, he utters this chilling line that has stuck with me.
Okay.
Men shall in future times need be all, but to say that it has been performed in Herod's way.
Oh, wow.
It's like he's acknowledging the legacy of his cruelty and the dark path he's forged.
It's such a powerful and haunting ending, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not a simple case of good triumphing over evil.
Right.
It's a much more nuanced and tragic resolution that leaves the audience grappling with the complexities of power,
Yeah.
ambition, and the human condition.
Mhm.
It's a reminder that even those who seem to have it all, power, wealth, influence,
Yeah.
can be ultimately undone by their own choices and the consequences that follow.
And it makes you wonder, is that what Orrery was trying to convey to his audience? Was he holding up Herod as a cautionary tale?
Right.
Saying, look what happens when ambition goes unchecked,
Yeah.
when power corrupts.
It's certainly a plausible interpretation.
Yeah.
Remember we talked about those parallels between Herod and the English monarchs of that era
Right.
by showing the tragic downfall of a king consumed by his own desires?
Mm-hmm.
Orrery might have been subtly commenting on the dangers of absolute power and the need for restraint and balance.
Yeah.
It's a message that would have resonated deeply with audiences who are living through a time of political upheaval and uncertainty.
It's fascinating to think about how a play written over 300 years ago can still speak to us today.
It really is.
I mean, the specifics of the story might be different,
right.
but the themes,
Yeah.
power, ambition, love, betrayal,
Uh-huh.
those are universal and timeless.
They absolutely are, and that's what makes great art so enduring. It transcends its time and place and speaks to something fundamental about the human experience.
Right.
Herod the Great is a prime example of that.
Okay.
It's a play that can be enjoyed on multiple levels, as a gripping historical drama, as a subtle piece of political commentary, and as a profound meditation on the nature of power and the choices we make.
I think what I appreciate most about this deep dive
Yeah.
is that it's not just about summarizing the plot of the play or
Uh-huh.
giving a dry historical overview.
Yeah.
It's about exploring the deeper layers of meaning,
Mhm.
the hidden connections,
Uh-huh.
the things that make this work of art so rich and thought-provoking.
Exactly. And it's about engaging with the play on an intellectual and emotional level,
Okay.
asking ourselves those tough questions about the characters, their
Uh-huh.
motivations, and the choices they make.
Right.
It's about recognizing that even a play written centuries ago can still challenge us, inspire us, and make us think differently about ourselves and the world around us.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Herod the Great,
Okay.
what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this conversation?
I think it's the idea that art can be a powerful tool for understanding the past,
Okay.
reflecting on the present, and even imagining the future.
Mm.
Herod the Great is not just a play about a king in ancient Judea.
Right.
It's a reflection of its time, a commentary on the human condition,
Yeah.
and a story that continues to resonate with audiences centuries later, and that's something worth celebrating and exploring.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Mm.
So for those of you who haven't yet experienced the power and tragedy of Herod the Great,
Yeah.
I highly encourage you to seek it out. It's a journey worth taking. And who knows?
Right.
You might even discover something new about yourself along the way.
Eh.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time,